Today we're going to get into something really fascinating, the difference between a code and a cipher. And we're going to do it by looking at what might be the most brilliant and totally unbreakable communication system ever created in history, the Navajo Code.
So, picture this. You're in the thick of a battle. You have to get a message to your commander, and it needs to be two things. One, it has to be perfectly secret, right? Because if the enemy intercepts it, you're done. And two, it has to be incredibly fast, because lives are on the line right now. So, can you really have both? Secrecy usually means complexity, and complexity means it's slow. That's the big paradox.
To really appreciate how the Navajo talkers solved this, we first have to look at what pretty much everyone else was doing at the time. We're talking about ciphers.
So what is a cipher? Well, you can think of it as basically a math puzzle. It's a system where you replace letters with other letters or symbols based on a very strict set of rules. It's all about switching out one character for another.
A super simple example would be, just flipping the alphabet. A becomes Z, B becomes Y, C becomes X, and so on. So if you get a message that just says GSV, you just work backward along the rule. G is the opposite of T, S is H, and V is E. You got it. T-H-E. It's all very systematic, very predictable.
And that systematic nature, that's also the biggest weakness. Because it's based on patterns, really smart people, and eventually machines, could figure out those patterns and crack the whole thing wide open. But maybe even more important on the battlefield, can you imagine encoding and decoding a long message, letter by painstaking letter? It was just way too slow.
Okay, so if that mathematical approach was too slow and too easy to break, what was the alternative? Well, it meant thinking about the problem in a completely different way. It meant using codes.
Now, a code is a totally different beast. See, a code doesn't mess with individual letters. It swaps out entire words or even whole ideas for other words or ideas. So it's not a math problem anymore, it's a language problem. It's all about shared meaning, not a rigid formula. And this is where the Navajo code talkers just took this idea to a whole other level of genius. They didn't just do a simple one-for-one word swap. No, they used metaphor, poetry, even. Let me just show you what I mean.
So, you're a code talker on the radio, and you hear this Navajo word, beslo. Now, you know the language. You know that beslo literally translates to iron fish. And from there, you make the conceptual leap. What's a fish made of iron that moves through the water? It's a submarine. See? A machine can't figure that out. A code breaker who doesn't understand the culture and the poetry of the language, they have absolutely no chance. It's brilliant.
So let's just lay it all out side by side. A cipher is mathematical, it works on letters, and it's super rigid. A code, on the other hand, is linguistic. It works on whole concepts, and it's fluid, it's associative. They are just fundamentally different ways of thinking about secrecy.
But here's the thing that made the Navajo system truly special. It wasn't just a code. It was something way more complex, way more secure. It was actually a hybrid system.
Think of it like a vault with two different locks. The first lock was the code itself, those poetic word associations, like using lostso, the Navajo word for whale, to mean battleship. But then, here's the second lock. That code word was spoken inside the incredibly complex grammar and sentence structure of the Navajo language itself, a language that, crucially, had no written form and that almost no outsiders had ever learned. It was a code hidden inside a linguistic fortress.
And that's what made it invincible. You couldn't capture a code book, because there wasn't one. You couldn't steal a machine to reverse engineer it. The whole thing was an oral tradition. It only existed in the minds of these incredible men.
So, okay, it was perfectly secret. We've established that. But what about that other half of the puzzle we started with? What about speed?
This is where it just becomes mind-blowing. To send and receive a simple 3-line message with one of those clunky cipher machines, it could take half an hour. A Navajo code talker could do the exact same job in 20 seconds. Not minutes, seconds. That's not just better, that's a complete revolution in how you communicate in a war.
So the Navajo system totally solved that paradox. It gave them perfect secrecy thanks to that amazing hybrid structure, and it delivered that secrecy at a speed that the enemy could never, ever hope to match. It was simply unbreakable and unbeatable.
And that just leaves us with one last thing to think about.
For years, the US government had actually tried to stamp out the Navajo language, calling it primitive and forcing kids in boarding schools to speak English. They saw it as a weakness. But when everything was on the line, that very same culture, that weakness, became the nation's single greatest strategic asset. It really makes you wonder, what other amazing strengths are we overlooking just because we don't see their value yet?